Route 66, the Mother Road, the Main Street of America, or the Will Rogers Highway. Whatever you called it, it was the iconic highway that cut through America's heartland and carried dreamers west. It even sparked a song, Get Your Kicks on Route 66, by the Nat King Cole Trio in 1946. After World War II, Americans were more mobile than ever before. Many men who had trained in the West during the war now decided to move from the snow belt to the sun belt. From 1945 to 1960, Arizona's population grew by 74%. This phenomenal growth brought a lot of new roadside businesses. Gas stations, motels, and diners had all sprung up during the war years and started to mushroom during the good times of the 50s and 60s. Cabin camps grew into motels that offered adjoining restaurants and swimming pools. Gas stations with one or two pumps started offering full-service bays. Hotel dining rooms and downtown cafes gave way to roadside diners and drive-in restaurants. Other roadside businesses such as trading posts, grocery and general stores, wrecking service, curio shops, and drive-in theaters made an appearance along the highways. Traveling Route 66 was an exciting, interesting experience with lots of things to see and do. Families were now ready to explore the West, and with the tough years of the Depression behind them, they were able to vacation states away, still keeping to a budget, of course. And it was into this era that one family headed out on an adventure along the Mother Road that they never got to complete.
I'm Darlene.
And I'm Melody.
This is Hard Times and True Crimes. So I just wanted to mention that we have t-shirts available now, and they are super soft and great quality. We're really proud of them. And so if any of you are interested in purchasing one of those, that's just another way to support us. Private message us or email us at hardtimesandtruecrimes@gmail.com, and we'll tell you how to do that.
Yes, and also we've had some questions from some people who would like to support us but have had a hard time knowing how to do the Buy Me a Coffee. Mm-hmm. So if you are listening from a platform that you can click on your show notes, scroll to the bottom, there will be a link there that says support the show. You can click on that, or you can go straight to our website, hardtimesandtruecrimes.com, and there should be a little yellow coffee cup icon that says support the show. If you click there, it will take you to our Buy Me a Coffee page, and you can choose if you want to just do a one-time 1 cup for $5. And of course, it's not a literal cup. It's the platform name, but it does put money back into us producing the episodes.
Yeah, it keeps it to where we can continue to put out these episodes.
Right. And we thank you all so much because we have got some very loyal listeners who have been so supportive. Thank you all.
Yes, thank y'all so much. So, Melody, you want to tell everybody what you've been up to this past week?
Yeah, we just returned from a 10-day trip out west to the Grand Canyon, and we went to Utah, so to some of the national parks there, Bryce Canyon and Zion, and did some hiking and just enjoying God's beautiful earth, and it was amazing.
The pictures were gorgeous. I enjoyed those so much. You should post some in our group.
Okay, I will. Actually, I took some while I was there specifically for the episode I'm getting ready to cover.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you definitely need to post those.
I will, but I will go ahead and tell you right up front. We were out in the desert, so it's basically a picture of nothing. Highway and open land.
Oh, my gosh.
But, yeah. Actually, I'm going to tell you something funny. You have to tell Curtis.
Okay.
We did the one from Tucson, Arizona, but if you know that Tucson is spelled Tucson, and so his intro, he pronounced it Tucson, Arizona. So I had to message him and ask him to change it, and we all got a good laugh out of that. The place we stayed right outside of the Grand Canyon entrance was a place that I thought was Tusayan. It was Tusayan. So I was saying Tusayan, Arizona.
Yeah.
But we went to the store, and I went in and I asked this Native American guy was working in there, and I was like, how do you say the name of this town? Is it Tusayan? And he belly laughed.
Oh.
He said it's Tucson. And I thought, well, that sounds a whole lot like Tucson, Arizona, which also
Right.
is not pronounced the way it's spelled.
No.
So I laughed at myself. So, Curtis, I'm right there with you with Tucson or Tucson,
That is so
Arizona.
funny.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and jump into this
Yes.
episode, and then I'll tell you about those pictures that I took.
Okay.
In June of 1961, a young Oklahoma family set out on a trip to California. J.D. Welch, just 33 years old, and his wife, Utha, 31, they lived a modest life in Oklahoma with their 4 young sons. Jimmy, the eldest brother at age 12, 9-year-old Billy, 8-year-old Tommy, and 5-year-old Johnny, the youngest. The couple had a 5th son, Noble, and he was born between Jimmy and Billy, but he had died in infancy. Like many young couples raising a family in the early 60s, they worked hard. JD was a long-distance truck driver, and Utha, she was a stay-at-home mom. So the family of 6, they lived frugally and simple lives,
Yeah.
So that summer of 61, they packed up the car and they headed west to California on their way to visit relatives. It was just a long-awaited family trip to visit JD's mother because she was scheduled to have a surgery.
Okay.
So they were just going to go out and visit her and help with maybe some recovery.
Okay.
Well, the boys had brought along a small canvas pup tent. They were hoping to use some of the skills that they had gleaned from the Boy Scouts. Some nights they decided they would opt for a hotel, and then other nights they would just camp out so the boys could use their tent, and the parents would just sleep in the car.
That
Now,
sounds fun for boys, though.
oh, don't you know?
Yeah.
Now, this was a time, of big cars, sleek lines, large motors, and roomy interiors. And so the Welch's car, it was a 59 Oldsmobile sedan, recently purchased. No problem fitting 4 boys in the backseat of that thing.
Right.
And it was a time, obviously, before seatbelts were the norm, too. So you had 6 kids piled across the back seat. That wasn't a big thing.
My grandmother used to brag that they never used seatbelts.
I can remember being like a little and riding on my mama's lap in the front seat of her Dodge Charger all the time. Like my older siblings were in the back seat and I sat on mama's lap.
Yeah. Yes. I remember those days, too. We did not use seatbelts when we were younger.
Or car seats.
Nope.
So to look back on that now is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I can't really fathom it now. So the family followed Route 66. The
cool.
iconic,
Infamous. Yeah.
the legendary road that carried millions of travelers west through small towns, open desert, and endless sky. And this route was a common one for JD, one that he drove sometimes twice a week on the road as a truck driver. So on the first night, they drove from Oklahoma down to Texas before they stopped for the night in Amarillo. The next morning, they got up early and they headed out for their next leg of the trip. By the end of that day, they had reached a little town called Ash Fork in Arizona, where they filled up the gas tank, and then JD went and inquired at a local motel. We don't know why the family didn't stay there that night. Maybe it was just the rate that they gave him was too steep for whatever. But for whatever reason, they decided not to stay there, and they continued down the road a little further. They skipped the next town, which was Seligman, Arizona.
Okay.
Now, I was calling that Seligman, but got corrected on that while I was out in Arizona. I had to ask, how do you say that again? Seligman, Arizona.
Okay.
That was just 13 miles down the road from where they had stopped previously. And it was, a populated area, so they could have stayed there, but for some reason they didn't stop there either.
Okay.
They just bypassed it and they went a little further, and right along Highway 66, along the Aubrey Valley desert area, there was this barren stretch of land, and they stopped, and that's where they were going to camp for the night. And this is where I stopped and took pictures.
Okay.
I stopped at the area where they would have been. And we did go through Ash Fork and Seligman.
Okay.
We took that same route that they drove. So they put the tent up just a few feet from the car. I mean, like they literally just pulled the car off the side of the road.
Right.
It was not a campground or anything like that. It was just pull it off into the desert and there you are. And they got the boys settled in for the night. And then JD and Utha took their usual places, with JD sleeping in the back seat and Utha asleep in the front seat.
Utha. That's a different name, isn't it?
Yeah, and I hope I'm saying it right. Utha.
It sounds like it.
Hope so.
Yeah.
The next morning, little Johnny, the youngest Welch, he was the first to get up and go wake up his parents. He went to the front seat to get his mommy, and he found her. But something was just strange. He couldn't get her to wake up. and he told his brothers something was on Mama's face.
Oh, gosh.
So Jimmy, the eldest, went out to see what was going on. And that's when he discovered his parents non-responsive, with blood all over their faces.
Oh, my gosh.
It appeared they had been shot. So the panic-stricken boys immediately tried to wave down help.
Yeah. They didn't hear it?
They didn't hear it. And that's one of the odd things about this whole story.
Okay.
But several cars passed by before they even got anybody to stop.
Oh, no.
I can only imagine their panic.
Yes.
Yeah. When I drove that stretch of road, there were hardly any cars around. But that's not a widely used road. That's the old Route 66 now.
Okay.
But back then, you have to remember, this was when Route 66 was like a main road
Right.
through that area, frequented by many travelers. So it's interesting to me that it took them a few times to get somebody to stop,
Yeah.
because to see small children standing on the side of the road waving you down.
Probably in a panic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, two men finally did stop. This was Dan Kramer and Jerry Eagle, a pair of traveling salesmen. And little Johnny told them, "Someone shot Mommy and Daddy."
Oh, my gosh.
I know, isn't that horrible? So the two men, obviously, they take in the scene and they jump into action, and one goes for help, and they're just trying to console the boys. And the boys were saying, "No, we didn't hear anything." Two of the first responders on the scene were Highway Patrolman Dan Burdino and Deputy Sheriff Perry Blankenship. The boys were taken to nearby Prescott, Arizona, while relatives of the slain couple were called and notified and told to come and pick up the kids. An investigation of the scene takes place, which produced more questions than answers at that point.
Yeah.
And one of those big questions being, how'd they get shot this many times and not be heard by the boys who were asleep?
How many times were they shot?
I didn't say that yet, but
Okay.
I am going to get to it in just a
Okay.
minute when I talk about the autopsies. I just realized I haven't told you that yet.
Yeah.
So at first, the investigators, they tentatively ruled out a robbery as a motive, because even though JD's wallet was missing and it had about $60 in it, Utha's purse was still there, and she had $147 in it, and her expensive wedding ring set was not taken either. So they're thinking, well, why would you leave the most valuable
Right.
stuff?
That wasn't adding up.
No, it wasn't. And again, those boys, the tent was only like 3 feet from the car. And
That's so wild that they
So
didn't hear
wild.
anything. Okay.
So Deputy Blankenship's wife, her name was Birdie, she worked at the local cafe not far down the road in town. She had heard about this call come in about the kids, and so she told her husband about a possible suspect. She said a man had come in the cafe earlier that evening the night before, and he asked for a coffee, but he only had a nickel, which wasn't enough to pay for it. And she thought he was acting so weird, so she just kind of gave it to him for free.
Okay.
But later that night, he came back, and this time he had money to buy a full breakfast, a $20 bill. And so that was a little strange, and she thought maybe this guy is the guy.
Yeah.
So as officers surveyed the scene and went over these questions, why Utha's money wasn't taken, why the boys didn't hear the shots, and who was the strange man that had come to the diner and with money that he didn't have previously.
Yeah.
They did start getting some answers, and they determined, okay, this actually was a robbery. What they realized was Utha's purse had been under her body. That's where she had put it for safekeeping while she slept. But the shooter, they determined he or she or they, there may have been more than one, they didn't know.
Yeah.
Probably had just not seen it because it was dark and they were in a hurry to get away.
I wonder, had they not seen the boys?
That's a good question, and I'm going to ask you that at the end of
Okay.
this episode, because I have some questions I want to explore.
Okay.
Right along those lines.
Okay.
So the Yavapai County Sheriff's Department, they launched this extensive investigation because this was actually the fourth killing along this stretch of road in 3 years.
Oh, wow.
So they did send the couple's bodies to Prescott for autopsies, and that's where I'm going to talk to you about the shots. Both adults had been shot multiple times with a small caliber bullet, such as a .22. Utha had been shot 3 times in her head. They think that she probably never even woke up, that she was shot as she slept. But upon hearing the shots, they felt like JD raised up to either defend himself or, just to see
Yeah.
what. So he was kind of sitting up a little bit, and he had been shot 4 times.
Okay.
Officers said they thought the murder weapon was a revolver. They stated that only a revolver will retain its cartridges, and after inspection of the area, no cartridges were found and no gun found and no description of the killer from the boys. They didn't really have much to go on. So they were thinking, well, at least we know it's probably a revolver.
Right.
They're just trying to find anything that they can look into. They did have some witnesses who had reported seeing 2 young hitchhikers near the crime scene around sunset that night before, too. So over the coming days and weeks, several suspicious characters, at least 10 different people, were looked at for the crime. But one by one, they were all cleared, and the clues just dried up, as that happens a lot. At this time, J.D.'s brother, Richard Welch, and his mother, Vera, they arrived in Prescott to get the boys. The boys were taken to California to live with their father's family members. And although they were separated at the time, I guess because there's 4 of them.
Right.
So they didn't all get to stay together. Some went with this relative and some with another. And I couldn't find the breakdown of who was with whom. But one relative did tell the press that they hoped to bring them all together before school started in the fall, so they could at least go to the same school, even if they didn't live in the same house.
That's so sad.
I find that very sad. So a few weeks after the Welch's murder, 2 men were arrested in Fort Scott, Kansas, for the robbery and killing of a Fresno, California liquor store owner. And their arrest led them to being suspects in several crimes, one of them being the slaughter of the Welch family out in Arizona just a few weeks prior to this arrest. So the investigation into that murder began to paint a picture of those possible suspects, and specifically one, James Abner Bentley.
Okay.
Now, James Bentley wasn't a small-time crook. He was a dangerous, volatile drifter with a growing history of violence. Just weeks before J.D. and Utha Welch had been gunned down, Bentley and his accomplices committed a robbery and murder in Fresno at Bryan's Highway City Liquor Store. Alongside him were Fred Waldo Williams, Billy Joe Chappelle, Chappelle's wife Linda, and their 18-month-old baby daughter. Chappelle would later tell police that he only participated in the crime because Bentley had threatened to kill him and his wife and baby if he wasn't the getaway driver. The reason for that was Bentley felt like having the woman and the child in the car would make him look less suspicious.
Okay.
So, on May 22nd, 1961, so just a few weeks before the murder I just told you about, Billy Joe Chappelle drove the group to the liquor store and parked behind it. Bentley and Waldo went to the front door and met the proprietor outside just as he was closing up for the night. Bentley fired 2 shots, one hitting the man in the chest and one in the abdomen, causing him to fall. And then Waldo shot him in the head. And
oh my gosh.
The wounds were fatal. The men took the liquor and they took the $189 in cash and got back in the car, leaving Homer Ped Bryan dead on the ground. Some sources do say that was $130, but $130, $189.
Right.
Think about it. I mean, the man would have given them the money if they didn't have to kill him.
God.
The group then planned to rob another liquor store, but there were too many people around that one, so they just gave up, and they drove back to the Chappelle home. And that robbery wasn't even their first. The night before, the same group had committed another heist in Modesto, California, in which they took $100. They pistol whipped the clerk, but they didn't kill him. So it was a clear pattern. It wasn't desperation. It was deliberate. It was calculated. It was escalating in violence. And so after those robberies, that's when Bentley and Abner left for Arizona. Bentley was estranged from his wife for a short time, and she had family out in Arizona. Authorities believe that he actually went out there just following her, trying to get her back. Whatever took him there, whether it was chasing his wife or running from a crime spree, we don't know, but it didn't take him long to find more trouble. So on June 21st, Bentley and Waldo attempted to rob gas station attendant Edward Smith in Phoenix. They shot him during that robbery, but he didn't die. And apparently they made this group of teenage boys nearby kind of help them out. And those boys later told officers that they had bragged to them about killing a California bartender. And authorities realized that was the Homer Bryan, the liquor store owner back in Fresno.
How stupid.
I know. Sometimes, have you noticed? I mean, I know you have, but isn't it just kind of wild how sometimes criminals just can't help but brag?
Yes,
They just have to
yes.
run their mouth.
And usually that's their undoing.
Yes, and that's part of the thrill of it for them is getting the attention, and then that's always what gets them caught.
It's bizarre.
It really is crazy. Bentley and Waldo were now on the run, and they made it all the way to Fort Scott, Kansas, before they were apprehended. There, they were arrested on June 29th and questioned about that murder of Homer Bryan. It was at this time that authorities did question them about the Welch's murder in Arizona, but Bentley's mother and his estranged wife both gave him an alibi, saying, oh, he was in Fresno then. But the authorities said, no, actually, this robbery and attempted murder of Edward Smith in Phoenix placed him in Arizona at the time. So he was on their radar.
Okay.
1 week after that arrest, the 24-year-old Bentley confessed to being the one who fired 2 of the shots that did kill Ped Bryan in Fresno. And then both men, Waldo and Bentley, were taken back to Fresno to face trial on the charges of robbery and murder. Now that officers could place the men in Arizona, where the Welches had been killed, and now they also have mugshots, they take another look at the 2. So they go back to Bertie, the waitress that night at the diner who had noticed the suspicious guy, and they show her the pictures of several men, and she immediately identifies James Bentley as the man that came in the diner that night.
Okay. The one that could not at first even afford the coffee.
Exactly.
Okay.
And to add more weight to the suspicion of their involvement, again, like we were saying, Bentley, he couldn't stop himself from bragging. So while he's being held in jail on these charges, he reportedly told another inmate that he had been the one to kill the Welches that night in June out in the desert. That murder of Homer Bryan. All 4 were charged. Waldo, James Bentley, Chappelle, and Chappelle's wife would all face charges for their part in that robbery and murder. At first, they all pleaded not guilty.
Okay.
Chappelle and his wife, they claimed they were part of the plan to rob it, but only because they were threatened, and they didn't know it was going to involve murder.
Okay.
But Bentley and Waldo admitted they had a $15 wager over who was going to shoot the victim.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't know if Chappelle knew about that or not. But anyway,
I wonder if that was before, like if you're committing a felony.
yes, that comes into play.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So maybe he's realizing that. I don't know if I've told you this before. I probably have, but Tim's cousin was in a situation like that.
And he got charged with murder, right?
Yeah, he was the getaway driver in a robbery that he didn't know was going to turn into a murder, but it did. And he did prison time for being a part of that. So
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like something about like murder and the commission of a felony, and then you'll be charged with murder.
yeah, like it's a capital offense too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
During James Bentley's arraignment, he wept openly in court, asking the judge to just go ahead and sentence him to death and get it over with. He begged him, he's like, just send me on to the gas chamber. That's where I'm going to end up anyway. But his court-appointed lawyer requested a suspension of the charges until his sanity could be established.
Poot.
Yeah. This is something kind of weird. I thought this case was really strange because Bentley, then he simultaneously entered a plea of not guilty due to insanity. Okay. And then afterward, he and Waldo both withdrew their not guilty pleas and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. And that first-degree murder, that's where I said that does come because it was during the perpetration of a robbery. But even though he withdrew that and pleaded guilty, the other plea for not guilty due to insanity was not withdrawn.
That is weird.
Yeah, and I don't understand how all that went and worked. But according to newspapers at the time, it was a bit strange then too. But that was what happened.
Okay.
And there's another weird thing that happens in the trial later too that I'll point out.
I wonder if it's because they didn't want to. Were they already in the middle of their trial?
No, they haven't gone to trial for those charges yet.
I wonder if it's because they wanted to avoid a trial, and maybe they thought if they pled not guilty and claimed insanity, then maybe they could get away with it like without a trial.
Maybe that makes sense. You're probably right.
Yeah, it's the only thing I can figure.
Well, that did lead to a trial for Bentley on a sanity trial, basically. And that trial became very dramatic and notorious in this county's history. The first phase of James Bentley's trial was to handle the sanity claim. And during that hearing, a psychiatrist gets on the stand, and he testified that Bentley had told him he could see the dead man in his mind's eye.
Oh, my gosh.
And at those words, Bentley jumps up from the table, leaps to his feet, and shouted, "I'm not going to sit here and listen to this stuff." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Authorities rushed over to restrain him, and in the process of him scuffling with him, he struck Lieutenant John Belton in the mouth and cut his lip.
Oh, my gosh.
And so the judge ordered him to be strapped and chained to his chair.
Well, good.
Yeah, I'm like, I had never heard of that in a courtroom.
Lord.
And then he warned him, if any more disruptions to these proceedings, and we're going to gag you.
That is crazy.
And they said that was something that had never happened before in a Fresno criminal trial. They removed him from the courtroom temporarily, and as they dragged him from the room, his mother broke into sobs, and then the judge admonished her and said, "You need to get control of yourself."
Right.
That same day, Dr. John McGrath, the psychiatrist, continued his testimony, and under cross-examination, he agreed with the prosecutors that anyone who plans a crime, disguises himself because they had dyed their hair, flees the scene, and hides evidence, clearly understands that their actions are wrong.
Right.
So McGrath conceded that although Bentley might suffer from chronic mental illness, he was not legally insane.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
It was also pointed out during that trial that even at the age of 17, a psychiatrist had dubbed Bentley a potential killer, evidenced by his violent tendencies even then.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The next day, psychiatrist Dr. Paul Levy testified that he found no mental illness in Bentley at this time. Mm-hmm. So he did have to face trial for sentencing for the first-degree murder in which he had changed his not guilty plea to guilty. In a rare legal move, the penalty phase was actually handed over to a jury instead of a judge. I didn't know that they could do that.
I thought that a jury could hand it over to a judge.
Right.
But I didn't realize, yeah.
So that's, yeah.
Okay.
So that jury sentenced Bentley to death.
Good.
As the verdict was read, Bentley's wife, Shirley, I guess they're no longer estranged, and his mother both collapsed in tears. Bentley, meanwhile, remained emotionless. He was overheard mumbling, "Don't cry, it don't matter." But his composure didn't last too long. When the guards returned him to his cell, they said he sank to the floor, physically and emotionally drained. And then, in a moment that would stay with authorities, he muttered, "I get blamed for everything."
Okay.
He's quite a character,
Yeah.
isn't he? Fred Waldo and Billy Joe Chappelle were both sentenced to life in prison for their part in the crimes.
The wife, too?
No, she was actually charged with accessory to crime, and she was sentenced to 1 year in the Fresno County Jail.
Okay.
And she was released after serving 9 months of that sentence. I was surprised that Waldo didn't also get the gas chamber because he shot the guy in the head.
That's wild.
But he got life in prison. I guess maybe Bentley was the mastermind who planned it.
Okay.
In April of 1962, so several months later after the trial, Bentley ended up being sent to the Vacaville Medical Facility after a suicide attempt and having hallucinations. They said he was making almost daily attempts to suicide. He was ordered to undergo psychiatric evaluation again. Also, this was just a little side note that I found interesting. In November of 1962, newspapers reported that Bentley's 16-year-old younger brother, Carl Gene Bentley, was being hunted after escaping from an institution in Phoenix after he had made a robbery attempt.
Oh my gosh. What a family.
Right? On Wednesday, January 23rd, 1963, the day for James Abner Bentley's execution arrived. His appeals had been exhausted, and his request for clemency from the governor had been denied. The night before, he had a dinner of hamburger, and after only 4 hours of sleep, he got up and had breakfast of ham and eggs. Catholic and Protestant chaplains offered solace in his last hours, and both stayed for the execution at his request. He had been hospitalized the Saturday before when his nerves cracked, but now he was surprisingly calm when he entered San Quentin's death chamber at 10 a.m. The deadly pellets were dropped at 10:04, and he was pronounced dead 8 minutes later. And that's the end of his story.
Okay.
Let's return to the 4 Welch boys, because my heart just breaks for those kids. Now, they faced a future without their parents, and as we've said, they may not have gotten to be raised in the same home.
Right.
They did eventually go to Tulare, California, if I'm saying that right, to live with their paternal grandmother, Vera Wheeler. I couldn't find much about their lives after that, but due to the thoughtless actions of a robber and a murderer, they had to live the rest of their lives dealing with grief over that loss of what was supposed to be a fun family adventure. You know, it turned into a nightmare that they didn't get to wake up from. And that leaves you to understand why Jimmy, the oldest, became a lifelong supporter of the death penalty, probably seeking justice for what he had experienced.
I'm right with you, Jimmy.
Yeah. This is my question. Why do you think he killed the parents and not the kids? Because he didn't have to kill any of the people he killed. Most people, if you have a gun, they're going to give you the money. Yeah. There's no point to kill other than the fact that you just want to. And then why leave the boys? I mean, it's not like he's this upstanding guy who's doing this good thing by not killing the boys.
Well, 2 things came to my mind. I wonder if he at first, like maybe in the very beginning, didn't see the boys. And he just was carelessly just going to shoot the parents. And when the boys didn't wake up, he just thought, maybe I just don't have, he just didn't have to.
Okay.
He probably would have had they woke up.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, it was really probably the grace of God that they didn't wake up.
It had to be. I mean, how could you not hear 7 shots?
Exactly.
Right feet away.
That's mind-blowing that they didn't hear that.
When I first started researching it and I thought, well, they didn't hear the shots, my mind immediately went to, oh, maybe they did it.
Right.
I mean, that's where our mind goes just because of all that we've read and seen already. But I'm glad it wasn't them.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know. It just left me feeling like, wow.
Do you have a theory? Like, why do you feel like he left them?
I really don't know. The whole time I kept thinking, I just wonder, like, I know he's not I don't think he had anything good in him. Like, I don't think he did it out of the goodness of his heart.
Like, he just didn't care, yeah.
I didn't think about the fact, you said maybe he just didn't see him. Maybe not. But he didn't know who was in that tent.
Right.
Could have been other adults. So I think maybe your theory that they just didn't wake up. So he probably didn't waste any time.
Right.
Staying around to see. He just took off. He didn't have to. Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, that's something.
But what a heartless person.
Yeah. What a horrible person. And then he faced so much anxiety, which he should at the end of his life.
And a lot of it was feeling sorry for himself.
I know.
I mean, all of those suicide attempts, and then I get blamed for everything.
Isn't that just, I don't know. I have such a hard time understanding that, but a lot of sociopaths are like that.
Yeah.
Narcissists, it's all about woe is me. They have all the compassion in the world, but just for themselves.
Let's leave it on that note.
All right. Those were some hard times.
Those were.
Now, it doesn't matter if you're traveling Route 66 through wherever it goes through, I-5 up the West Coast, or I-95 up the East Coast. You just remember that all roads lead to hard times and true crimes. Metaphorically, and in this case, literally. So I'd recommend just downloading every episode of Hard Times and True Crimes. And then you won't have any reason to leave your house at all. Because remember, no shut-in has ever been murdered on a road trip. You can like, subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and buy the girls 100 coffees right from the safety of your living room. So you make sure you tell everybody you know, and a few people you don't, to check us out. Till next time, goodbye.